So we're going to talk PHP 7 tonight. New features, performance improvements, and kind of what to expect. And then I've got it running here in a environment, so actually some of the little snippets I'm going to show you, we'll run them and play with them, and you guys can yell out, like, see if this works, and we'll try it. So, about me, my name is Josh Butts. I'm the VP of Engineering at Offers.com here in Austin. I have been an organizer at this group for a long time. Like competitive skee ball, if you want to know more about that, see me after. Involves drinking. You can find me online, JimboJSB, pretty much everywhere. And when I say pretty much everywhere, I mean GitHub and Twitter, because that's pretty much the only place I am. But if you want to try and find me on some other service, it's probably JimboJSB. So, PHP 7. This is a major release of PHP, right? Like if you do semantic versioning, you've got major, minor bug fix releases, right? So PHP 7 is a major release. It's the first one since 2004. So it's currently in beta. I believe it's beta 3 as of very recently. So it's kind of expected November 2015. Be slightly surprised if it actually ships in November 2015 because it's massive. But in the next near future, you can expect this thing to be 7.0, probably sometime November, December-ish. But they've been pretty good about hitting, probably for the last, I want to say 3 years or so, the PHP core team has had a really good cadence as far as how long things are release candidates, how long they're beta, how they do feature freezes. So there's a pretty good process behind this, and it's from what I've seen, well on its way to being production ready. I haven't encountered any bugs where that doesn't mean they're not there, but it seems to run like code just fine. So PHP 6, what happened to PHP 6? So UTF-8 happened to PHP 6. It's, UTF-8 was supposed to be PHP 6's thing. We're going to make everything in this language UTF-8 compatible and multi-byte strings, and everything's going to be wonderful. And all of these internationalization problems are just going to vanish because everything's just going to support all these fancy characters, and that never happened because that was a pipe dream at best. To be able to say, like, hey, this language is not UTF-8 safe. Let's re-engineer the entire thing to make it UTF-8 safe. No one cares about that. Some people do, not the people who write the language, though, unfortunately. PHP 5.4 happened, right? So there was going to be PHP 5.3, and then we're going to go to PHP 6, and that was going to be awesome. And they finally were like, well, we can't pull off this UTF-8 thing, so let's just take all the other stuff that is ready and put it in PHP 5.4. It was fantastic. Huge, huge upgrade over 5.3, and everyone who was waiting for all those features was happy, and they forgot about PHP 6, except, so then they were like, okay, well, let's make these other point releases of PHP. And then, then we got to make this new big version of PHP with all these great new features. And everyone said, PHP 6 sucks, we can't use that name. It's already been ruined by these people who wrote books about it. So we have to vote on this, and everyone voted, and pretty much everyone agreed that the best thing to do would be to just skip PHP 6 altogether and go to PHP 7. Sorry, PHP 6 book authors. I did find these images on Amazon. They are for sale on Amazon, but only used in very good condition. I don't even know. I actually remember, gosh, it's probably been almost 10 years ago at this point. I remember seeing that red one on the shelf at Barnes & Noble. And I hadn't been doing PHP for that long at that time, but even I knew then that there was no such thing as PHP 6, and how could you possibly have written a book about it? I'd had it published widely enough to be on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, but there it was. Fast, easy web development with PHP 6. It's kind of probably a collector's item at this point. You can find one. This was like, I want to say these were like $30 a piece on Amazon for a book about something that literally does not exist. So interesting, right? And you can actually, there is a branch, right? You can go check out the PHP 6 source code and download it, and maybe even compile it. But you can, it's in an SVN. You can go find it on php.net and download it and see the PHP that never was. So that's at PHP 7, right? The only thing people care about, it's insanely fast. Depending on what day you ask and who you talk to, it's slightly faster than, nearly as fast as, or just exactly as fast as Facebook's HHVM runtime. It really is almost impossible to tell at this point, depending on how you measure it and who measures it and who they work for. If if they work for Facebook, HHVM is generally slightly faster, just maybe like 1% faster. If you work for Zen, the other way around, HHVM is always like 5% slower. But that's just the way it is. It totally depends on the benchmarks. There's really no point in me standing up here and trying to show you that PHP 7 is faster, because I could probably contrive some sort of very simple thing that exploits PHP 7's fastness. But you have to measure it with your actual code. You can't really compare. But generally speaking, across the board, it is faster. You shouldn't trust any of the benchmarks you see out there. It is by no means reflective of the performance gains you will see in your code. Big, heavy applications, things that are Zen Framework 2, Zen Framework 1, WordPress, Drupal, complicated things are faster. If you have a old school spaghetti code PHP site that literally includes db.php at the top of every file, that kind of thing, hard to say whether they're really faster or not, because they probably, my guess is they're bound by the database at that point, if that's the kind of application we're talking about. But you never know, right? It's going to be faster. It's just a question of how fast. You have to actually run it. And I'm going to actually say maybe don't bother running it. It's so unlikely it's going to be slower that the new features you get just outweigh that benefit anyway. So really, you just want to be on the latest version because you don't want to be left in the dust, right? You don't want to be, oh, I've got this server, it's running PHP 5.1 and I can't upgrade it, and this app doesn't run anything newer, and the server has the hard drive failing, and my whole world's going to come down around me. You want to upgrade to this stuff anyway, right? It's not worse. I guarantee you it's not worse. So what are you looking at, right? This is kind of the relative scale, right? PHP 5.3 being the slowest takes 100% of the time, right? We use that as the benchmark. PHP 5.3, if we were to put 5.2 on there, it would be about the same difference as 5.3 to 5.4. 5.2 was quite slow compared to 5.3. We at offers.com saw a massive increase with 5.3 and 5.4. Kind of 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, yeah, it's a little faster. Do a little optimization here and there, fix a few bugs here and there, add some new features, great. It gets maybe 5% faster each time, great. PHP 7 is that much faster, right? That's kind of, I looked at probably 10 different benchmarks people had run, and forgetting the absolute values, these were the kind of scalar percentages they were looking at, right? We have PHP 7 is really that much faster. So what does that actually mean, right? Hopefully that means you can run two things, right? If your application is already fast, it means you can run it on less servers. That's, if you're running in Amazon is not cheap. I mean, it's so cool and they do all this great stuff for you, but then you get a $20,000 bill at the end of the month. And you're like, well, I guess it was worth it, but man, that's a lot of money. And wouldn't it be cheaper if I just owned my own servers? So if you're paying by the hour for servers and you're paying literally for the compute cycles per cycle a month, right? Having PHP be faster means that you can run your thing on less servers, right? The other thing that it can solve for you is that it is faster, so if your application is a little slow, maybe you can fix that for you, right? It is not going to fix the fact that you wrote bad PHP code. You can't fix that with making the engine faster, but it can help. So I don't think this is going to be a panacea for my PHP code is slow and now it's magically fast. It doesn't fix the fact that your thing takes 2 seconds to render a page. If it cuts it down to 750 milliseconds, that's still not very good. But it can help you. The improved performance will help you scale much, much better. That's where you really see the advantage is if I've got to run 10 web servers and now I don't have to run 6, right? That could be hundreds of dollars a month in Amazon that you're not spending. So PHP 7 is fast. If for no other reason, if it had no other features, it would be worth upgrading just for that. I will talk about it kind of toward the end, what the trade-offs are for that speed, because it didn't come for free. So PHP NG was the kind of genesis of PHP 7. The idea was some people got together, they were kind of tired of Facebook prancing around HHVM and saying we're so much better than the core PHP developers. We've done this thing, it runs all your PHP code, it's so much faster. You guys are dumb. Why can't you make PHP faster, right? So they sat down and they're like, okay, well, what is different about HHVM, right? How did they make it so fast? And depending on who you talk to, they kind of just copied those ideas and put them into PHP 7. And they started out PHP which was like, how do we kind of, not greenfield, start from scratch, but how do we take the Zen engine, which is what powers the language, how do we take that and just fix all the stuff that's been sitting there since 2004, right? Like, things we did in 2004 that we now know are a terrible idea. We have different computers, different architectures, everything is 64-bit now. If we had to sit down and do this the right way, how would we change it? That was PHP. That is the branch, if you will, of PHP that turned into PHP 7. They said, hey, this is really good. We got to put more people behind this and actually make this the next PHP. And everyone was like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Let's do it. So there's a major rewrite, right? It's still the Zen engine. The Zen engine has been in version 2 point whatever for a long time. It kind of bumped a point release every time a new point release of PHP came out. So like a point release of the Zen engine is what gives you traits and closures and features of a language like that. This is a major release of the Zen engine as well. This takes Zen engine to 3.0, which corresponds to PHP 7.0. Most of what we did is data structure redesign. So I don't truly know what the new ones look like, but I do know quite well what the old ones look like. They don't look like the old ones anymore. All of PHP's variables under the hood are in 5.x and below are stored in a thing called a zval. So it's the Zen engine has these structs and they're in C, right? PHP's written in C, for those of you who didn't realize that. So all these variables are stored in structs, and those structs have a type. So one of the fields is, oh, this is a PHP integer variable, or this is a PHP string variable. And then it has other fields that tell you, what the values of those variables are, or what the different arrays are, things in the array are. So that's how it's actually done. So they basically took zvals and just got rid of them and replaced them with a more efficient data structure. And that's where most of the savings come from. If you imagine, like, what are things the language does? Probably thing number one is store data in variables. If you fix the variable engine and you make every variable faster, that's a great way to make the entire language faster. That's where most of the speed comes from. All of this, competition and pressure from HHVM, right? Straight up, that's why PHP 7 exists. That's why it is as good as it is, because you have Facebook with HHVM, at one point, not so much anymore, at one point pushing to say, hey, we'll give you HHVM. Let's make HHVM the community runtime. Let's make PHP 7 just call it. Instead of the Zen engine, it will be PHP 7 powered by HHVM, right? People at Zen, not so fond of that idea. So this, this competition between these two different runtimes that could both run PHP code has been wonderful. And that's really what has pushed it to go so fast, because previously you can only benchmark it against yourself, right? You can say PHP 5.5 is 5% faster than 5.4, and everyone's great, right? Big improvement for a point release, great. Now you have like two different teams of developers that have different goals. One of them's getting paid like hardcore to work on this. The others are mostly volunteers. There's a lot of ego on the line here. So this kind of stuff really has driven both of them forward, right? So like PHP comes out, every benchmark shows it's faster than HHVM. HHVM comes out with a new version, like 6 weeks later, that blows that out of the water, and it's great, right? Everyone's winning. So that's kind of the overview. Any questions? All right, let's talk about actual features. Spaceship operator. This on the surface isn't super interesting to me, but I'll show you what it really does save a lot of code in some certain scenarios. So this basically, if you have two things in your hands, two things to compare, integers, variables, whatever they may be. Doesn't work on objects, works on arrays, works on strings, and you want to have like kind of like a universal comparison for them, right? So spaceship operator will spit back 1 if the left-hand one is bigger, 2, or -1 if the right-hand one is bigger, and 0 if they're equal, right? By itself, great, right? This doesn't do much for me, because this is just a clever way of writing an if statement, right? And it's true, this is a shorthand. But the nice thing is that having these comparisons of greater than, less than, or equal to represented as integers like this does give you some control over that information. I have an example of that, we'll look at it later. This is actually called the combined comparison operator if you want to look up the documentation for it. But pretty much if you search spaceship operator, you also find it. Multiple languages have these, and multiple languages call this the spaceship operator. So that's basically the idea. The one place that I think it is really nice and it really makes the code look clean is if you have to use usort. If you have to write a user-land comparison function to sort with. It turns out that usort needs a callback that gives you back 1, 0, or -1. So you can write really, really small closures for usort to do sorting of custom arrays and objects and hashes and that sort of thing. Null Coalesce. I wanted this one almost bad enough to write it myself. I, for years, have threatened to contribute this to PHP, and finally, someone else has done it for me. So this is basically if set or is probably the right way to say this. This is a slightly different version of using question mark colon, which is a shorthand ternary operator. It's kind of this or that. Right? If you have two things in your hand, it's this or that. The first one, question mark colon, that's a PHP 5. You can use that, and it does kind of a standard Boolean evaluation of the left-hand one, and if it's true, it gives you the left-hand one, and if it's false, it gives you the right-hand one, right? This or that. The downside is that in a lot of places, that will trigger a notice, because it's quite possible that the reason the first one is false is because it hasn't been defined. Especially, that's part of PHP, right? We're doing dynamic programming. It's a dynamically typed language. Who knows whether that variable has come around or not? A lot of times, if you're doing type checking or argument checking inside a function, I need to see if these arguments are the right thing, if they're in the right ranges. Maybe it's a null, it's an optional argument, you haven't passed it. So it still gives you 5, but it triggers an e-notice. This isn't particularly concerning to me because I run with notices turned off. I really feel like if you are bothered with all the notices in PHP, you might as well use Java. That's my personal opinion. Not many people share that. So the null coalesce, you can see the second line there where it's C question mark A. It's still 5, right? It's still the same evaluation, but the logic is actually a little bit different. The first one is picking 5 because A. The first one's picking that because not being set, being null or being undefined evaluates the false. The second one is picking A because the rules for if set or, it isn't checking it for Boolean truthiness. It is checking to see if that variable is set or not, right? So the whole point of this is if the first one has not been set by something in the runtime so far, pick the second one. And this is a shorthand. You're not getting any new functionality out of this. It's just a shorthand that makes it a little bit cleaner to do some common checking operations here. So the one thing that's slightly interesting is echoing, choosing between 0 and question mark colon, which is the old way of doing it. Old way still works, by the way. It's just a different operator. That takes 0 and gives it kind of a Boolean evaluation, and that evaluates to false, so it picks 5. The null coalesce one picks 0 because it's not evaluating it for Boolean, it's evaluating it for is it defined, and 0 is defined, so it picks the first one. So it's a little bit different behavior, but there's an intentional difference between those two. Question mark colon, that's the old one. It evaluates for Boolean. Question mark evaluates for the variable being set. This is the big one. Scalar type-ins. So this was hotly debated. I don't want to use the word rage quit because that's not a fair comparison, but the person who had contributed the code, most of the code for this, effectively quit working on PHP source code because she was so frustrated with the trying to get this through, right? Like, spent, I don't know, hundreds of hours probably writing all the C code to make this work. And just, I mean, it's a coalition. There's no real benevolent dictator for PHP. A lot of people have opinions. A lot of people like to comment and write things on mailing lists, and it's not a very positive environment to get this feature in here. So it is there. Other people picked it up. So we do have the ability to hint on, previously in PHP you can hint arrays and you can hint objects, right? So you can say I want an object of this particular class, and that's great. Scalar type hints give us the ability to hint on an integer or a string, or a boolean or a float. So that's a big difference, right? That is allowing PHP to behave in a much stricter manner than normally you might think of it doing. So the day to day, this is it's a nice to have. IDEs will love this because it'll allow them to do auto suggest and put a red squiggly line under your code if you pass the wrong argument. Much easier than what I'm doing now. PHP Store is really good at that, but it's going to be really even better than this because it can be much more aware of what's being passed around. This is pretty straightforward, right? I mean, int, string, float, bool, that's it.
So if it's not a int, is it error or just a warning?
I'm going to get to that. Thank you for asking that question. I'm glad you asked. So it's a new error. We're going to talk about what actually happens a little bit later, but it is it defaults to coercive, right? So if you ask for an int and you give it something that is a string, but is a string of an integer, it'll cast it to an int for you. It's like, okay, I get it, it's a number. Especially, right, in PHP, where do we get data from, right? A lot of it comes either out of the database. Even in the very latest, greatest version of PDO and MySQL, everything comes out of the database as a string. Doesn't matter what the database column type is. When you get it back in the driver, it's all a string. Same with the internet, right? You're out on a website somewhere, you type something into a form, you type it into a query string. However you pull data in over HTTP, it's all a string. You're more than welcome to cast it to an actual integer. Usually PHP is happy to do that for you, and it doesn't really care, right? PHP, the language, generally speaking, treats string 2 just like the number 2, and you never even know what's happening. So that's the default, right? The default here is that these type hints behave like the rest of the language, and so they will coerce a thing that feels right into the right data type, the best that it can. And when I say the best that it can, it's not fuzzy. There are very strict rules of exactly how that works. You can go read the documentation. It'll tell you exactly, in all cases, what will happen. So if you pass string 2, that will pass an integer type int, right? It'll accept that. What you can do, if you really want to use Java, is you can declare strict types equals 1 in the PHP file where you call these functions from. Not where they're defined, where you call them from. The cool thing about this is that you can write code that's a library that has type hints in it, and the person who's using that library can determine whether or not they really want to be strict about your type hints. So if you just throw this line in the top of your file, it means that any functions you call from that file, it's file-based, right? From that file, any functions you call, if they have type hints, they now become strict, which means that string 2 is not good enough, it must be integer 2. I don't know. Do you want that? Like, generally speaking, show of hands, who would turn this on? Not surprising. The people I would have picked. So yeah, I mean, this is another thing, right? Like, IDEs will love this. Unit testing will love this. Code quality will love this because you can be really sure with a very dynamic language about what's going to happen at runtime. This is one of the things I actually really love about Go, is that you hardly ever have to run the code because the compiler can tell you whether it's going to work or not because of strict typing. I think it's useful, but I think also if you get too crazy with it, you're kind of losing some of the flexibility that PHP gives you. So that, there's a place for it. And especially if you are putting together code that other people will use or other people on your team and you want to make it work in a specific way, this can be really great, right? Especially if you're bringing new people in and you already have a lot of, like, you're a consultant or you have consultants that work for you. you can put your code into such a state that it will behave very predictably and prevent people from making unintentional errors. Yeah, Dave, what's up?
Does enforcing strict typing make it faster?
No.
I don't think so. Not that I don't know that it has any change.
Not
or
at
any
this
more
point.
than anybody's measured. It still has to, it may actually be. Well,
Would it make it easier to go to HHVM?
No.
No.
I don't think so. This declare strict types equals 1 is another hotly contested thing, right? Not the fact that you should be able to configure how you want these things to behave. The fact that there's exactly one other thing you can ever declare in PHP, in fact you may have never even seen declare before. You can declare ticks equals 1, which does something completely arcane that I can't even properly articulate to you. But you can declare ticks equals 1 if you're really into like process control and signal handling and socket I/O. And ticks are basically like iterations through the engine, not seconds, but actually well below that of iterations through the engine. It is what it is. One of those things you just have to memorize. Like that's how you turn this on, or if you see that, that's what it means. So it's a big change especially as far as these bigger frameworks. I think are really going to adopt it, where they've got tons of really nice object-oriented code, and this can make it even easier. Especially, currently you're kind of reliant on doc blocks. I'm going to put a doc block on top of this so the IDE can hint it for me, so that these static analysis tools can try and do their best with dynamic code. This makes it a little bit easier for them to do their job, I think time will tell whether I think people are going to adopt the type-ins crazy, like left and right, all over the place. You're going to see these type-ins. Whether people go strict or not, I don't know. I think maybe 50-50 on that.
When you turn it on, how long does it stay on
It's per file.
per file?
Yeah. So if you put it at the top of the file, it's on for that file until you backspace it.
So if you include a file in that file and you're operating in the included file, that's still on, right?
No.
It's from the calling context. So it's where the function is called.
Okay.
So if you do an include on a file within another file,
Yeah.
and you do not have that declare there, then strict type hints are off for the included file. If you want strict type hints on, you must have at the beginning of the file, just like your namespace declaration, that declare.
This is one of the reasons why I don't particularly like this, because it seems a little bit confusing to figure out, not what's actually going to happen, but like this, if you want to go strict all the way, this is the line you're going to type at the top of every file. There isn't a setting where you can be like php.ini strict type hints on.
Well, I mean, you can make it a constant and then just like globally turn it on or off.
I don't believe you can.
No?
You have to put this. This is not a function. This is a.
I mean the one. Like if you make the one a constant.
We'll find out. Remember that, and
Okay.
we'll try it in actual PHP 7.
Okay.
So in addition to that, we get return hits. Another thing, IDEs are going to love this, right? So I can put this kind of colon after my method and argument, and I can tell what it's expected to give back. And it is an error if you do not return that thing, right? It's not a parse error. It doesn't check it at compile time to find out if you've coded it correctly. But it will give you an error back at runtime if you try and return something out of this function that is not a boolean. So that's kind of in the same vein. I don't believe this has any bearing on coercion or strict. It's just straight up, did you return a bool or not? So that's another way that you can add kind of more definition and structure to your functions and your objects with this. This is another one. I'm sure this is going to get super wide adoption because, generally speaking, especially for people who write libraries and frameworks, this is great for people who consume code, right? Because when they're writing code that uses your code or that person's code, and they're in an IDE or something that is smart about this, they can get a lot more inspection into what's happening and what to expect back from these functions. without having to, and it's not doc block based, right? Like doc blocks are like, you can write the doc block and then that could not match the actual code, and even if it's just a mistake. It may be wrong, and then it's kind of confusing, especially when your IDE is saying, no, that's definitely going to give you an object back, and it doesn't. That's the nature of dynamic languages. This makes it a little bit more predictable.
What if it's multiple return types? Not saying it's a good idea, but
You cannot do that
You can't do that.
currently.
Like, you can't say mixed. You just wouldn't need that one.
You just leave it off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There-
So then if the test function there, it's expecting a bool return, do 0 and 1 still count?
I believe yes, but let's test it. Full disclaimer, I have not written any specific PHP 7 code. I have run my stuff under PHP 7. I have not written any functions myself that use this. But we'll just literally copy and paste this and we'll try it.
The question is, would a 1 be accepted as a Boolean?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that it will be.
I would bet the option.
We'll find out.
Because it would be considered an
side
int.
bets.
What?
It might consider it an int. It's a-
Right.
Yeah, it seems like if you're gonna go to this point, then you gotta-
You're slightly neglecting the stupidity of how PHP does booleans.
Depends.
You're underestimating their ability to mess that up.
It's gonna enforce this, that type on, if you extend this, or override this function, disassembly, right?
Yes. So you asked about, is it an error or an exception if you mess one of these things up? Yes, it is. So new ways that errors are handled. The top level namespace exception class, which is part of the language, now implements a top level interface called throwable. Throwable interface describes most of what the current exception class does. Like get message, set message, get code, set code, describes a constructor that takes a message. Throwable looks like the signature for exception for the most part. There is a new class, top level class called /error. That also implements throwable. This is the beginning of catching fatal errors and not having them just die. It's not all that, it's a little bit that, right? This is the beginnings of that, and this will get built on in future versions. But the RFC for this, I believe, is called exceptions in the engine. And this is the, okay, we'll add some new stuff so we can start building on top of this. We can't bite off that project all at once. So you have, I think right now the only errors that you have are the top level error. Like you can throw an error, like a user can do that and the language will also do that. They also have parse error and type error, which are, those are built into the language. Type error is what you get if you violate a type hint. So you can, and the cool thing is that is catchable, right? You can catch that like an exception if you need to. So type error is what you get if you violate a type hint, if you violate a return hint. I think there's one other place where they'll throw that. So that's what you're going to see. The language will also just throw error. I have a slide that shows that it literally will just throw a top level error. But the cool thing is even though it's an error, it's catchable, right? Previously, some things that previously may have been fatal and your PHP is dead are now catchable and you can keep running. So the other thing, the reason they did this is so that I feel like a lot of people, when they catch exceptions, they just catch the exception class, where you could have caught something much more specific. If you were expecting a PDO exception, you could have caught that, and then regular exceptions from something else may have flown through. And maybe you don't actually want to catch like a runtime exception. You only want to catch database exceptions. Other exceptions you weren't expecting, go ahead and let them kill it. So they intentionally have this error class so that it will not catch your existing exceptions. So no one right now in PHP 5 is catching an error. They're only catching exceptions. So these new things, as far as upgrading your application will still die in the same way that it did before, and that's actually a good thing. Because you actually now can look at it and have an opportunity to make an adjustment and fix it, as opposed to now your application that worked one way before works a completely different way. And the fact that it works is actually bad because you don't know why it works anymore. Right? It magically started working and you have no idea why. Hopefully, you don't have these things, fatal errors, like uncaught exceptions all over the place. But the point was, aside from let's start making errors catchable, let's not break existing code. So what does this look like, right? This code right here has 2 errors in it. The first one is a type error. I am calling this test method and I'm passing it a string, right? That's going to fail that integer type hint. I'm not doing declare strict types or anything, but I am intentionally passing it something I know it can't cast to an integer. So I'm going to catch that with a type error, and I can, fail, it's the wrong kind of argument, whatever I want to do with that, right? Type errors you can spit out, they have a message and a code just like exceptions do, because they inherit throwable. So, and I can nest these catch blocks, right? So I can, catch both type errors, and I can catch, I also have intentionally have a syntax error in that SQL. So I can catch, my existing exceptions differently, right? And I can easily just tack on, if I want to start catching errors in my existing try catches, I don't have to modify what I have. You can just tack that on and start catching those things too. You can also catch just plain old error, right? Just like you can catch plain old exception, you can catch errors of any kind if you want to be more generic about it. So, this is one of my hugest pet peeves, and this is the beginning of where you get these exceptions in the engine. This is probably the #1 500 server error issue on offer.com. If we have something that generates a white screen for the user because PHP has fatal error, it is almost always this. It is somebody expected there to be something in the database and it wasn't there, right? I'm on a page that represents an entity, a row, and a table. I'm going to pull out that row and spit it out to somebody, right? And I'm doing that, it's, let's just say it's index.php ID = 7, right? That assumes that ID = 7 is in the database, especially if it's, ID = 7 is the home page, right? Let's just say that, right? So it assumes that there's a home page for this site. It assumes that it's there. The controller for that is going to go get it, and someone forgot to actually check and see if that row is in the database, or it was there and now it's deleted. So you expect to get back, in our case, a model, a data model, and instead you got back null. And so the first thing you do is you get this thing out of the database. The second thing you do is you call, get image URL on it or something like that, right? Fatal error happens more often than I would like to admit. So the cool thing is that previously calling a method on a non-object, fatal error, call a method, whatever, on a non-object, it's a fatal error and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. In PHP 7, you can catch it. This is really the first exception in the engine that they've added. They're not exceptions, they're errors, but they're catchable, right? So this particular one, what we have now in our code base is a lot of if-elses around, get this thing out of the database. If it's not null, then do something, right? What would be nicer is if those could all be try catches instead. Slightly more expressive as to what's actually happening, right? I tried to get this thing out of the database, and the exception stated that it wasn't there. The end result isn't much different, right? My catch here is the same as an else, but I feel like this is more accurately describing the state of the system. More of these are coming in later versions of PHP. I'm not going to get too much into this, but this is one where I would say, if you're thinking, man, I really want to upgrade to PHP 7 when it comes out, just go read this. Just read it from top to bottom. There's a lot of changes here. So if you use $, meaning you use variable names to access things, if you use a lot of dereferencing, where you have, chained methods or methods that you return an array that you just directly do it brackets on and access the values out of that array, the behaviors are changing. This is one of the trade-offs, right? It's plus because they're way more consistent and you can also dereference a lot more things. So you can do a lot more of that, but what they've done is they've made it more consistent and more how you would expect. Some of the changes are not obvious. So like, if you have a lot of code that does this, it may not work in PHP 7 out of the box, and it may not be obvious why it doesn't work. So I really recommend you go read all the changes that happened for this. This is one of those things where like you drop code in here and it almost all works except for this one thing, and you just pound your head on figuring out why it doesn't work. It's probably this. They call it uniform variable syntax. What it really means is, let's give you a lot more power to do variables and dereferencing, but also we probably got to clean up some of the old stuff over it. Since it's a major version and we can get away with some backwards compatibility breaks, let's clean it up a little bit.
And part of this, if you have code that does not work under uniform variable syntax, then generally placing curly brackets around things or parentheses around things to enforce order of operations will fix your problem.
Absolutely. This is another one that's a little bit subtle. Remember, it's another one of those, there's a little bit of trade-off for this. The for each, previously when you for each an array, PHP arrays have an internal counter that says what is the internal pointer for the element in the array. Previously, when you for each them, it moves the counter, right? You are moving the internal array pointer one to the right every time. The new one doesn't do that. Part of the reason is because they've changed the way arrays work and they've changed the data structures for these. And one of the reasons why PHP is faster means that you can't do this anymore. And also, I would argue that it's not immediately obvious that that's what's happening. Generally, you don't care, but sometimes you may care. If you have for each loops that have current and next in them, they're almost certainly broken in PHP 7. Easily fixable, right? Same thing, right? You have to go look. So current and next. The reason you might have this is if you're for eaching and you want to skip one, right? Normally, I would probably do that with a regular for loop where I can just mess with the counter. But if you have to skip one, that could be a problem, and you may need to refactor that a little bit. The other thing that is kind of a side note to this is if you are for eaching something, let's say it's an array or an object with an array stored in it, and inside the loop you're changing that thing that you're for eaching, I'd argue you've been doing it wrong all along. You're going to have problems with this now. Just because of the way they've changed the way data structures work, they've changed the way these loops work. They're faster because of it. It's an improvement. It's just something to be aware of, yeah.
Do you mean just passing by reference, or what are you referring to?
If you actually if you are for eaching an object that implements
And I
traversal.
have like the value by reference, and I change the value inside the for each loop. That's
Changing the right hand side of the as is okay still.
but not the index.
Not the index.
Okay. Thanks.
I would imagine in most cases this isn't an issue.
Uh-huh.
But it is a behavior change that's not obvious if you haven't had someone tell you that's happening.
Thanks.
E-deprecated, this is another one that I just turn off altogether because I don't want to hear about it. If I want to use the damn MySQL functions to write like a one-off PHP script, I'd like to use them. Unfortunately, they're gone. MySQL_query is no longer exists in PHP 7. One with MySQL. So PDO is there for you. Use it. MySQLi is still around. But if you have MySQL query, MySQL fetch a soak, all those guys, they're gone. That probably also means that that spaghetti code app we were talking about doesn't work anymore. That's unfortunate. Good news is if you really need to, find and replace MySQL underscore with MySQLi underscore, and it mostly works. But the E deprecated is gone. That error little it just doesn't exist anymore. They just put that, all of those things are either notices or warnings. And basically everything that was deprecated up until PHP 7 is gone. If it was previously deprecated, they just deleted it. There are some new things in 7 that are newly deprecated. They'll throw notices and warnings. Anything that was a deprecated warning in 5 has been actually deprecated. No longer there. MySQL underscore is a big one. The other big one of note is anyone still using the POSIX regular expressions, ereg underscore functions. Those are gone. Just the functions no longer exist. It's what you want. The only time I've ever had PHP site faults was using ereg. Other little goodies. If you are too lazy to type your use statements on one line, you can now type them in, there are 2 lines, you can now type them in 1 line. It is kind of nice if you have a bunch of things from little classes from the same namespace you want to pull in. You can use this curly bracket syntax and list them out like this. A lot of shorthand stuff that's added to this. It can be nice, especially if you have, a class that pulls in its Laravel and pulls in like Symfony and 7 other different projects that it has, and they all have different namespaces. It's nice to have all the namespace things on one line, just because the use blocks in some frameworks have gotten to be like 20 lines long at the top. This will let you be a little bit more concise with it, but there's no actual behavior change here. It's just a different syntax. Strict is gone. Interesting, right? They've changed the error handling quite a bit. I don't know. Strict is another one I turn off. My PHP is a very liberal PHP. I don't know. We always turn it off. I do have one library on GitHub that someone was really desperately trying to get me to make run strict. Spent a bunch of time trying to debug it, figure out why it didn't work for him. And I'm like, dude, I don't see what the problem is. It works fine for me, bro, on my computer. And it turns out that my error reporting is way more lax than his, and that's why it doesn't work. But anyway, strict is gone, and they've again moved all that stuff into other notices. I believe I actually said that deprecated is gone. It's not what I meant. I misspoke. All of the deprecated features are gone. Deprecated is still around. That's my bad.
A lot of the strict stuff, they flat out did not move it into another error message. So like, we don't actually care what your date time zone was set to. We have an intelligent default in there. It's called UTC. We're going to stop throwing a freaking strict notice on that because nobody cares.
Yep. There weren't that many of them. The other thing is that some of the strict stuff is also covered in some of the type ending stuff, right? So the problems that was trying to solve is solved a different way now. What else have we got? Anonymous classes. I believe this is my last one. I actually think this is really cool. This is a regular old PHP class. Got foo, got a function bar, and it goes hello world. Pretty standard, nothing exciting here. We can actually extend this in runtime now, just like we can use a closure to make a new function. We can make a new class on the fly without defining it in a PHP file. We can say new class extends. We're extending here. You don't have to extend. I'm extending foo on the fly and changing its behavior by overriding the bar method. Again, the example I've seen for this is overriding logging. If you have a logger class and you need to slightly change the behavior for logging in a certain place in your application, I've seen that as an example. It's just a nice thing to have. You can also do a new class and not extend something if you want to. That's just basically new standard class at that point. You already kind of had that, but it has a different syntax where you can actually define the class as opposed to new standard class and then just push data onto it as public properties. So anonymous classes, basically it's the class equivalent of a closure. Lots of other languages have these. In Ruby, this is called struct, which is not really a good name for it, but so that's a new feature that you can use. My guess is that this one doesn't see widespread adoption for a while. There's not a lot you can't do because this doesn't previously exist. But there definitely, seems like one of the ones where somebody will come up with something really clever to do with this. It kind of, they hadn't thought about doing it this way. It allows you to do something really tricky. I think it'll be a while before anybody really pushes on this feature. Questions? Before we'll actually test some stuff here.
Well, let's do clapping. So thanks, Josh.
Yeah.